Muhammadu Buhari, retired Army Major General and former military dictator, former chairman of the corrupt Petroleum Trust Fund, a government corporation that operated like an alternative government. Muhammadu Buhari, the man whose military regime became the first to sentence a woman to death by firing squad. This film tells the story of Buhari's past political career and what the future may hold for a Nigeria that falls under his rule again. What does the future hold for a Nigeria ruled by General Buhari?
The APC has promised Nigerians that a vote for General Muhammadu Buhari will liberate them from the current economic hardship.
Achievements of President Jonathan, including the construction of an airport, the establishment of Almadri schools, as well as the considerable success in curbing insurgency in the north.
Nigeria declared independence from Britain in 1960, and despite great promise, the country has suffered from violence between northern and southern Nigerians, Christians and Muslims, different ethnic groups including the Igbo, Yoruba and Hausa, and from repeated military coups and dictatorial governments. In 1979, the country elected its first democratic civilian president in many years, Shehu Shagari. However, Shagari's civilian government lasted less than 4 years as he was overthrown in a military coup led by northern military officer General Muhammadu Buhari.
The new leader, General Buhari, had 2 days' notice from officers organizing the coup that he would be the new head of state. His qualification, his political and economic experience.
Buhari had previously been governor of several states in northeastern Nigeria, in the area that is currently witnessing fighting between the Nigerian armed forces and the violent Islamists of Boko Haram. He had also acted as petroleum minister, a position with great importance in a country where most state revenue comes from oil sales. General Buhari was also the head of the Petroleum Trust Fund, or PTF, a government-owned organisation that handled large quantities of oil revenue. An official investigation years later, instituted by then President Olusegun Obasanjo in the 1990s, revealed that a shady consultancy company called the Afri Projects Consortium, or APC, had been contracted by PTF as management and project consultants. Buhari, as executive chairman of PTF, delegated to this APC the power to push through projects and make budgetary decisions. Afri Projects Consortium, APC, assumed absolute powers of conceptualization, approval and execution of all projects. A PTF trustee called Captain Usman Jibril later recalled that Buhari brought in the late Ahmad Salahijo, his in-law, without informing us. We just saw these boys in the meeting. We asked him, "Who are these boys?" He said that they were just helping him to take notes. We didn't know that he engaged them as consultants without our knowledge and consent, because we are all members. I told him that it was wrong. As trustees, if something went wrong, we were the people that would be prosecuted, not any other person. I asked them to change the procedure, and they were not ready to change it. I said, okay, bye-bye. Ahmed Salahijo was mysteriously reported dead the very day a committee was set up to probe the PTF. The APC was indicted for overcharging the PTF for up to 25 billion naira, and an internal management committee also reported that substandard, soon-to-be expired drugs were sold at overinflated prices. On the week of January the 11th, 2010, Nigeria's This Day newspaper reportedly got hold of an exclusive copy of a report by the Petroleum Trust Fund Interim Management Committee. The report outlined that the AFRI Projects Consortium had collected almost $200 billion in revenue from the Nigerian government. The scale of the corruption was simply staggering and shocked readers in Nigeria. When he took up power, Buhari began arresting and imprisoning state governors that he accused of being corrupt. Yet this punishment was not dealt equally to all parts of the country. In southern Nigeria, where the residents tend to be Christian, Buhari's regime was swift to throw public figures in prison without evidence or trials. In the north, however, where the political classes tend to be Muslims and share the same ethnic background as Buhari, the situation was different. Only one northern governor, Apa Aku of Benue State, was imprisoned. He was also the only governor in the region from a Christian ethnic group. The Nigerian musician Fela Kuti, who had faced oppression and violence from previous Nigerian regimes, sang the following lyrics in protest. Driver get accident, na conductor Buhari charged to court. Under Buhari's military regime, people from all sections of society were detained without fair trials and subjected to inhumane conditions in dark prisons at his whim. Politicians, tribal leaders, musicians, civil society leaders, all were put in prison, sometimes sentenced to terms as long as 600 years without evidence. Public figures who were cleared by civilian courts would be rearrested and imprisoned under emergency laws passed by Buhari's government, especially the infamous State Security Decree No. 2, which allowed anyone to be imprisoned by the government. Prisoners were denied medications they needed to survive. Others emerged blind from prisons that had no windows. Taye Sholarin was one of the regime's critics that was jailed, and he was denied access to asthma medication that he needed. Other public figures were put in jail and tortured, accused of corruption. Yet most of these have since been declared innocent, and in some cases the Nigerian government has later issued apologies to the prisoners and their families for the way they were treated by Buhari. Indeed, in some cases, the politicians he jailed have subsequently been honoured as some of the best performing and least corrupt figures of the time, and several have had universities and other public facilities named after them. One former politician who spent the entirety of Buhari's regime in prison despite no evidence ever being presented against him later said that, "After the Buhari regime put me in prison for serving my country so selflessly, I felt Nigeria was not worth dying for or sacrificing for." He was subsequently cleared of any wrongdoing and received an apology from the Nigerian state. Conversely, politicians loyal to Buhari who had committed crimes for which there was ample evidence were not prosecuted. One state governor was arrested at Heathrow Airport in London with over £35 million sterling, yet he was never charged or investigated. Buhari also protected another state governor, whose administration had authorized a massacre of peasant farmers who were protesting after the government had confiscated their land without compensation. Buhari also failed in his oversight of the nation's economy and government finances. When he took over, the government had been negotiating a contract to improve rail transport infrastructure in Lagos and between other cities across Nigeria. In a city with constant traffic gridlock, this initiative would have revolutionized transport and allowed the population to move freely. In 1982, under the civilian regime, the government signed a $700 million contract for the rail project with a French consortium. The Lagos government was required to pay only 10% of this money, while the balance was to be paid on favourable loan terms by the consortium. However, Buhari decided to abandon the project, since he was uninterested in developing transport and other infrastructure in a part of the country where he had enjoyed little support. As a result, the government forfeited $60 million to the contractors, and rail transport in Lagos and Nigeria stalled for over 20 years. One of Fela's hit songs was based on the